We're here with Zetta Elliott, who is the author of A Wish After Midnight and Bird. Zetta, we've just finished a panel discussion on historical and speculative fiction. Would you like to tell us about your book, A Wish After Midnight?
Sure. Excuse me. Well, A Wish After Midnight, I consider it speculative fiction. It's also obviously historical fiction because part of it takes place in the past. It's also a sort of neo-slave narrative, a new look at the journey from enslavement to freedom. And the speculative aspect of it means I get to ask, what if? What if I send a 15-year-old girl from Brooklyn in 2001 into the past to 1863? How would she adjust to living in the city of Brooklyn, which is going through a lot of upheaval because many things happened in that year. On January 1st, the Emancipation Proclamation took effect, freeing fugitive slaves in states that had seceded from the Union. In March, President Lincoln issues the Conscription Act. They're desperate for soldiers to fight in the Union Army, but they aren't taking black men in New York State yet. And so poor white immigrants, mostly Irish, are thrown into the draft. Wealthy white men can buy their way out for $300. That creates all kinds of anger and anxiety, which ultimately results in a riot in July of 1863. So Jenna not only has to deal with being a subordinate person because of her race and gender and age in the 19th century, but coping with the tumultuous situation of the riot. Where does freedom lie? Is freedom in Liberia with her boyfriend Judah, who believes as a Rastafarian that Africans should return to Africa? Does it lie somewhere in the past once the Civil War ends, or do they need to find a way back to the future? Are they actually truly free?
How do you get kids to read your work? Why is it important to them? Why should it be important to them?
Well, I think the publishing industry is slowly being transformed. There's a lot of resistance because there has been one model that's been in place for a long time. And that model does produce some really fantastic books, but in my opinion, it's not efficient enough to represent the variety of stories, the range of stories we really need to make sure that every child that picks up a book can see a mirror, can see their own life reflected in that book, in addition to be able to look into someone else's world. As Rudine Sims Bishop says, a book should be a mirror, a window, and a sliding glass door. Our books showing kids their reflection, our books showing them another world, our books giving them access to a world they may not be able to travel to on their own. So I thought I could go the traditional route. I have 20 unpublished picture book manuscripts, I have a middle grade novel, I have all kinds of material that was simply sitting on my hard drive, and I decided to give up on the myth of meritocracy. It's not just that, the best and the brightest are the ones that end up in print. Unfortunately, there's a very narrow gate through which you have to pass to get published, and because I could not seem to get through that gate, I decided to initially publish with a small multicultural press, Lee & Low. I was really happy that my story won their New Voices Honor Award, and that meant it was published, and I thought when it was published in fall of '08, I should have other books ready. And so I self-published A Wish After Midnight, my young adult novel, and A Stranger in the Family, my memoir, and 2 books of plays. And everywhere I went to promote Bird, I talked about my other books. And I think because I have certain credentials, I have a PhD in American Studies, Bird won a number of awards, it made it easier for me to say to librarians and educators, if you like Bird, you might also like A Wish After Midnight. And I was able to get it added to the collection of the Brooklyn Public Library and the New York Public Library. Some really open-minded educators and librarians and literacy coaches began teaching it in their schools, and I was quite satisfied with that. But that was, very localized. That's what was happening within New York City. And in order to reach a broader market, I decided to partner with Amazon Encore, which is the publishing wing of Amazon, and they were looking for great stories that had been overlooked, people who did not make it through the traditional gate, and I think that has the potential to radically transform publishing. We've always talked about the difference between being a writer and being an author, and that you needed someone's permission to be an author. Well, you don't need anyone's permission anymore. And that can be very empowering when people are afraid it's going to flood the market with horribly written stories. But I think that we need to have more venues, more routes to publishing, to publication. The marketing aspect of it is a challenge. It's a lot of work, but I know that writers who publish with traditional presses are out there right beside me doing as much footwork. So I think all authors have to reassess their ambition and their intention. My primary goal is to make sure that voices that we don't ordinarily hear in mainstream discourse are heard through my writing, but also to enable young people to tell their own stories, right? To say, you too can self-publish, you too can put together an anthology. I met some 6th graders who are writing memoirs. I mean, it's amazing that kids, when they have the chance to tell their own story, they become less willing to let someone else speak for them. And that ultimately, that's the power of the word, and that's why